All right. Welcome everybody to CIC, or Cutting into Cybersecurity. My name is Joel Bork, and I am joined by Brandon Krieger, my wonderful co-host. How are you today, Brandon?
Awesome. It's been a busy day. Like, how are you finding everything through the election, everything that's going on?
Yeah, busy week, but you know what? I enjoy it. I think everybody's been saying things are getting back to normal, but I don't know. We'll see more lockdowns probably, but I'm staying busy. How about you?
It's actually opening up for us there in Canada. They're actually looking at keeping the economy going, making sure they sustain it. So
Good.
that's kind of the plan. I know I actually just saw an article that I think was it Pfizer that came out with the flu shot or the vaccine.
Yeah, the vaccine is out and kicking. It's pretty cool, though. I think what's happening is they're done with phase 1 of trials. They're kicking into phase 2, but they've accelerated this process farther than we would have ever imagined. So,
Right.
all right.
It's awesome.
It is awesome. So I'm excited. I hope they get it out. I hope it saves lives for sure. So let's go ahead and kick this puppy off. Today is the handling, securing, and destruction of information and assets for domain 2.1. You ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
Looks like we have a few more people hopping on. If you are on LinkedIn or YouTube, guys, thank you for joining us. I'll try to monitor the chats on both. But if you guys could give us a little thumbs up on YouTube or give us the hand clapping over here on LinkedIn, that'll allow us to see who's joined so far and who's joining as we go along. So please give us one of the reactions on the bottom. You will pop up on there. Jessica Boyer, welcome. It's been quite a while since we've talked. Jessica Boyer got her first strictly cybersecurity gig over at eHealth not too long ago. So congratulations on that role, Jessica. Very excited for you. I hope all is going well and it's keeping you very busy.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Awesome. Brandon, so we're going to jump right in. I'm going to go ahead and link first and foremost, for those of you who haven't added this to your calendars yet, this is our live stream event for the CISSP study group. So this is a group of people who are studying for their CISSP. Sean Delane, welcome. Jessica, if you are looking to get your CISSP, this is the group to be in. We're actually studying every single week for that exam, and you're more than welcome to join us.
Now, just before you move on,
Yeah.
that link is actually, it's only in LinkedIn. Did you post it on YouTube and all the rest of the channels?
So when I post it on all the other channels, when I'm on this one, it goes to Twitch and YouTube. When I'm on this one, it goes straight to LinkedIn. So
awesome. Yeah, I just want to make sure. And don't forget, Twitch guys that are watching this, we won't forget about you guys. So if you want to comment, let us know, what's your journey, where you're at on your CSSP studying. If you're an expert in the field or if this is new to you, let us know. I'd love to hear kind of from you guys as well.
Absolutely. And Jessica, if you're not going for CISSP, Jessica, what's the next certification you're going for? We'd love to hear it. All right. Well, we're going to jump right in. We have to go over a quick recap of last week. Are you ready, Brandon?
I'm ready.
All right. Go ahead and jump on in. I'll get that image queued up.
Okay. So last week we actually covered identification, classification of data, which included PCI, payment card information, PII, right? Personal identifiable information, and then PHI, which is personal health information. Then we covered defining data classification. So a lot of information about data. And now we're kind of going through, and I think you put up the pyramid.
Yep, it's up.
So perfect. And yeah, then we went kind of through the classification. Now, one thing we were talking about last episode was actually draw a line straight down the middle. Then you've got, government, your classifications, and then you've got your, private and public, which is just your organization. So at least gives you an idea who you're working with, especially if you're doing consulting, which area you should be looking at. If you're working with government, you're looking at on the left side. If you're working in kind of the private sector or any type of company, you're looking generally on the right.
That's it. Absolutely. Different names, very similar types of controls that you'll put in place for each. So we went over that last time. Now, due to popular demand, we are going to jump right into our questions. For those of you who are in YouTube, throw it in the live chat or the comments. Same with LinkedIn. Question number 1, and before I do this, can you guys just, if you're ready to read these, go ahead and type yes in the chat for me real quick. Yes, you're ready. Just go with something like that, and we will throw up these questions. So, actually,
and don't forget Twitch.
And Twitch.
Keep
yeah. So I'll do that over here too.
That.
I'm going to throw it up. I think you guys are ready. There is a slight delay, so I'm going to go ahead and kick off question number 1 real quick. So here we go. Let me throw this up. All right. Question number 1. This is the softball. Obfuscation. the convoluting of code to such a degree that even if the source code is obtained, it's not easily decipherable. Is this true or false? And we'll wait a few seconds for them to answer this. Now, here's an interesting one. Literally, so I was doing, who was I with? Oh, the name's going to escape my mind. I was at a security conference, and we were doing basically pen testing and threat modeling with PowerShell on Windows.
Okay.
And it is as easy as typing TAC-O at the end of your PowerShell line to obfuscate your entire command. And it would just get lost in the noise that even a system administrator looking at it would never even be able to see that command being run. So really interesting stuff. We'll wait. Those answers should be coming through here shortly, but go ahead and take your guess. True or false? What do you think, Brandon?
I think it's true.
It is true. It is true. So we'll go ahead and hopefully those answers will come through here in a second, but let's go ahead and move on to question number 2. And I will fade that in here right now. All right. This one was interesting. It's homomorphic encryption. And looks like we had Jessica answering true. Congratulations, you're right. On homomorphic encryption, this is enables processing of encrypted data without the need to decrypt the data. It allows a cloud customer to upload the data to a cloud service provider for processing without the requirement to decipher the data first. So great use case for this is I never want my data to be unencrypted until I pull it back down and use the key to decrypt it. So you would pass it up, it would be stored completely encrypted, and then you would pull it back down still encrypted, and then decrypt it when it's local. So once again, true or false, is that the name for that type of encryption?
So enables processing of encrypted data without the need to decrypt the data?
So you can upload the data encrypted?
I would say true.
It is true. Well done. Well done. So that one is true as well. And once again, we're about 45 to a minute and a half delayed, so those questions aren't quite coming through, but I'm giving you a thumbs up on here, Brandon, for getting that one right. You ready for the next one?
Ready for the next one.
All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. And question number 3. Technically, it says 7, but it's number 3 here. The removal of sensitive data from storage in such a way that there is assurance that the data may not be reconstructed using normal system functions or software file data recovery utilities. So besides using forensic investigators pieces of software, what is the method of removing sensitive data from storage devices? It is A, clearing, B, self-encrypting USB drives, C, purging, or D, data modeling.
So yeah, let's give them a few seconds to answer that.
Okay. Yeah, I want to see if they can get this one. So this is an interesting one because you actually have 2 valid means of removing data from storage in this list.
So if you were going to narrow that down, so it's not self-encrypting USB drives.
Yeah, it's not self-encrypting USB drives. And I think everybody knows it's not going to be data modeling, right? That's not a means of... So you have either clearing or purging at this point.
Right.
So you hear of purging a lot, right? Purging is like if you're purging the data off a device, you're clearing it off the device. But we're going to go over this today, so that's why I brought it up. This specific means of removal that you can't reconstruct it using normal system functions is actually known as clearing. So this one is clearing. Purging is a more permanent means of... Yeah, so Salome picked purging, right? This would be your go-to for this, would be purging. You would think it would be purging. And this clearing includes overwriting of the data a couple of times, but that's not the same as purging. And we're going to go over that today. So I'm glad I brought this one up. The answer to this one is clearing. So let me go to number 4. I'm having fun with this. I think these answers are really, or these questions are good. Let's go ahead to this next one. And this is a little trick question because I actually have one marked on here. The critical point where material's intrinsic magnetic alignment changes direction. And I had no idea what this one was, obviously, when I did it. I actually guessed a second time and got it right. But what do you think, Brandon?
So the critical point where a material magnetic alignment changes direction.
Right. So we're talking about old school, we say old school, but magnetic hard drives, right? And you have a few options. Data remnants is A. B is clearing. We know it's not clearing. C is media encryption software. And then D is the Curie temperature.
I'm gonna go with the Curie temperature.
You are correct. Ding, ding, ding. Let me see if I got the claps on here. Nope, that's not the right one. There we go.
That's awesome.
So let me go ahead and fade us back in here real quick. Yep, the Curie temperature is correct. Now, that is the critical point at when a magnetic alignment changes direction. So you think about the magnets, right? When they push back and forth. When you get it to a certain temperature, it'll actually change direction.
I am considering starting to take the CISSP. Just not sure yet if I want to bit of the yeah. Oh yeah, so Jessica's actually thinking about it.
Yeah, no, Jessica, I think you should take it or at least start studying. Even if you don't have 5 years experience in the InfoSec or IT community, you can still take it for the associate and then upgrade it at a later date. So I recommend it. But yeah, a lot of these are just common process of elimination questions, right? That's what I'm realizing as I'm going through and taking these. If you can narrow it down to 2, chances are, just like you did, Brandon, it says what critical point, like media encryption software is not a point, clearing isn't a point, and data remnants isn't a point, right? A specific temperature, though, would be a point. So it's interesting to see these and see how it goes. Cool. Well,
also, when you look at the terms, right? Like you said, the critical point, but also changes direction, right? So that's kind of things you have to look at the wording and then things that. So it's good. It's practicing taking tests and looking at the wording that's used, being able to use those words and decipher kind of what's the best answer.
That's it. Now, Sean asked a question. He said, where have you been getting these questions? So I actually take the exam on my phone. There's an app called CISSP Prep. And it's a little green circle or target with a shield in it. So if you go on the App Store, it's free, CISSP Prep. But I actually have been going to multiple different websites online for CISSP prep exams and actually taking little 10-question exams. And when I take one that I like that's relevant to the data, I'll actually take screenshots of those and pull them in for this session.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. So today is on handling information and assets, and that is a key goal of managing sensitive data. And the key goal is to prevent data breaches. I think we can all agree on that point. Yeah. Right. So will you define it for us, Brandon? Yeah.
Data breach is an event in which an unauthorized entity can view or access sensitive data. And we see this time and time again. I mean, how many companies are getting compromised and their data is getting lost, right?
Yep. Now, a quick example is Equifax that, everybody knows the Equifax breach, 143 million records, including socials, names, addresses, birth dates. A more recent example for a APT group that I read an article on this week that went really good into like the C2 or command and control communications. There's an APT group that's active right now and has been since 2018 that is exploiting Microsoft Exchange servers. They're accessing resources and then they're using DNS, right? So like it'd be like you type in google.com, that's using the DNS protocol, but they're using the DNS method to communicate with their own infrastructure and using a subdomain label to then encode or encrypt the data via that means. Now, they can't do very much at a time, but they can send out data out of the network using DNS and then also use it for command and control. So very interesting techniques being used there. And that's that's kind of your up-to-date what's happening in the APT world.
Right now, what is APT, just for new people that are coming on?
Advanced persistent threats. So these are really, now we're seeing a multiple, it's kind of split now at this point, but basically it used to be, hey, Russia is paying, they have their own NSA that does offensive measures across the world. But now we're seeing we're seeing hackers that used to do it for their personal gain actually being hired on by governments. So very skilled at what they do, now have the backing and support of their government to then do those offensive measures. Now, we had a couple questions. Vivek asked, is the Mike Chappell book for CISSP a good one? His is the most common. I'm not familiar with that book. The book we've been using is the one on Safari Books. What's the title of that one, Brandon?
Yeah, let me grab that one for us.
So he's going to grab that one. The other one that I've absolutely loved is I met this guy named Eric Conrad at a SANS conference, and he does the CISSP prep boot camp for SANS, and he actually wrote the book, CISSP Study Guide, the 3rd edition, and it's with Eric Conrad, Seth Misenar, and Joshua Feldman, and it's been awesome. It's got test questions. It's loaded with content. And it's really good stuff. Now, if you need resources, so if anybody needs resources for CISSP, I've got a whole Google Drive folder full of resources. So I'm happy to share those out at any time with you guys.
For sure. And then the one that we've been that closest aligns to the framework of the ICS square is the CISSP Certified Information System Security Professional Official Study Guide. I think it's the 2008 version.
Okay.
2018 version by Mike Chaplin, James M. Stewart, and Daryl Gibson. So
you
that
said
one,
Mike Chappelle?
Mike Chappelle, yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so we are using that one on Safari Books, and that's actually directly where this content that we teach is coming from.
Right. So yeah, so just so you know, that's the one that directly lines up with the framework that when you go and kind of look at the ICS square, what's the different domains and areas of the domains you have to learn for the exam. That one's the one that closely relates to it. Now, don't get me wrong, use as many resources as you can. The more information you know, the better you're going to be prepared for the exam.
Now he was asking also for me to share those resources. I absolutely will share. I'm going to have to do it next episode though, because I'm on a different account and I'll have to switch computers to enable sharing for that. But join us next episode. I will get you all of the CISSP resources you could ever imagine in a Google Drive, and I'll share that link out with everybody here. How do you compare the CASP versus CISSP? So I'll answer that real quick. We'll keep it brief, but I had a client who had his CISSP, and he took the CASP twice and failed it both times. So they're very different exams. CASP is a little more technical. CISSP is very much an inch deep, but 4 miles wide. So that's my quick comparison. Any additional comments? And then just remember,
it's more administrative too. Think of it as CISSP is high level, right? High level business. This is stuff that you're doing at planning and more kind of top down, bottom up approach. Mm-hmm. Now the CASP, like you said, it's more technical. So it's not bad in the sense of you want to go in the technical aspect, but this is more if you're at the boardroom level, the C-suite kind of, director level, you're having these conversations about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and you have been, right? Every week. It's been interesting because before we kick this off, Brandon and I are talking about I actually just had this conversation this week and it just related to what we talked about 2 weeks ago, in the real world. And what was the comment you said? You were having a conversation with somebody and you were like, I just studied this in domain 1 of the CISSP. And they're like, oh, that's gold. Let me write that down.
So that's the thing. And I like to hear from you guys, since you guys have been with us, several, live streams, have you been able to use this in real world? Like Joel said, there's times when I'm going to meetings and conversations and I'm like, they ask a question about business continuity plans or, disaster recovery. And I'm like, oh my God, you just covered it. We just talked about that in depth. So yeah, here's what you need to know. And they're like, okay, hold on a second. Let me write that down. Okay. What do I need? And it's like, that's awesome because it's relative to exactly what you're dealing with day in and day out, especially when you're talking to senior level people.
Yeah, you got it. Now, we do got to jump back in because we're already sitting at 7:20. So let's jump back in. The following sections are going to identify the basic steps people within an organization have to follow to limit the possibility of a data breach. The first is going to be marking sensitive data and assets. So last week we talked about how you classify them and the levels you'll classify them at. Once you've classified those, you have to mark your data and your assets. So marking is often called labeling as well. So those two can be interchangeable. But when you're labeling sensitive information, you're ensuring that users can identify the classification level of any data so that they can take the appropriate steps to protect them.
Right. Then, for example, labeling the top secret makes it clear to anyone who sees the label that the information is classified top secret. Right. When users know that the value of the data, they are more likely to take appropriate steps to control and protect it based on the classification. Yep.
Now, I am going to take a step back because Trinity Nasam is a CISSP candidate, is just joining us today. Trinity, we just made it through domain 1. We're just starting into domain 2 of content, so you don't have a lot to catch up on, which is cool. Well, domain 1 was one of the longest domains, but you're jumping in at the right time. So you probably made it through reading domain 1, and then you were burnt out of reading the book. You're jumping in at domain 2, so join us Tuesdays at 7. We're going to be jumping in and we have questions at the beginning and then content as well. So when we're marking physical and electronic, right? So you have physical devices and then you have electronic markings for your data itself. A quick example is a backup tape, right? You'd have a backup tape that holds secret data or top secret data. You would have a physical label attached to that, right? And you'd probably put it in a different location than you would unclassified data. But you want to make sure that it's clear to everybody and you have a standard for labeling secret data on those physical assets.
Right. And similarly, if a computer processes sensitive information, the computer would be labeled, indicating that the highest classification of information that it processes. Physical labels remain on the systems or media throughout its lifetime. Then many organizations use color-coded hardware assets to help market. For example, some organizations purchase red USB flash drives in bulk with the intent that personnel can copy only classified data on these flash drives.
Yeah. Now, technical security controls identify these flash drives using like a universal identifier, like a UUID, and you can enforce security policies on them. So what we talked about DLP or data loss prevention software in the last session. What we're seeing is a lot of companies are using data loss prevention systems to block users from copying data to other USB devices and ensure that data is encrypted when a user copies it, right? We're also seeing endpoint protection systems or security controls. Like, for example, my Mac, my work Mac, you cannot use a USB or flash storage device of any kind, right? Mm-hmm. And if you do, even plug something in, even if it's your phone, our internal security monitoring team gets notified and they'll be reaching out to you very shortly.
Nice.
So
they get all the alerts. Now, marking also includes using digital marks or labels. A simple method is to include the classification as a header or a footer in the document or embedding it in a watermark.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So we see that a lot of times. You'll see it in the footer, right? Hey, this is internal or this is proprietary only. Well, when you're working in the government, it's going to have.
Or you'll see it watermarked in the back, right behind all the text.
Yeah. And one of the benefits, yeah, absolutely. You'll see that in the doc. You'll also see it if it's printed out.
Right.
Right. So if you're in a SCIF, you'll get a handout and they'll say, hey, this, physical copy is also top secret. Do not distribute or let it leave the premises. So the other thing about DLP or data loss prevention is that it can read those headers, those footers, those watermarks. You can set it up that if it has that marking, it will classify it and give it different security controls.
Right. And then some DLP systems will also add meta tags to the document when they detect the document is classified. These tags provide insight in the document's content and help the DLP system handle it appropriately.
Right. So if you're like scraping your documents or anything, if it's uploaded this file, you do some text translation, right, on it. You can then say some simple if and logic, right? If this document has these words, classify as. If it has this program tag, classify it as. And then it'll add that metadata in, and it'll all the other devices and storage locations will handle it accordingly.
Well, here's a little interesting when it comes to like copyright. Some of the files, like music files, don't have embedded meta tags and codes in it. So what happens is when you're using it on social media or you're using on that, they can actually catch you and flag you that you're using confidential information, right? And I've seen this time and time again where people will get a notification from a lawyer saying that you have to cease and desist using that image, using that content, because now they've tagged it, right? So that's other ways of kind of protecting your data.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, okay, so that's tagging, right? So we hit tagging, we hit labeling. Now we have to move on to handling the sensitive information. So this is more in regards, so when we talk about handling information, it's in transit, right? It's not sitting in a locked storage cabinet. Now we're handling it, it's moving. And how do you secure the transportation of the media throughout its lifetime, right? So when you're handling the data, you have to handle it differently based on its value and the classification. And as you'd expect, the higher the classification, the greater the need for protection.
Right. Even though this is common sense, people still make mistakes. Many times people get accustomed to handling sensitive information and become lackadays and with protecting it. So here's a question for you guys. Have you ever seen that in your own organization or kind of your environment where people are, I won't say kind of breaching data protection, all that, but not taking as serious? I'd love to hear what you guys think. I think, I'm finding, and I don't know about you, Joel, as people deal with it more and more day in and day out, they start to become desensitized that it is classified.
I 100% agree. And I see this often for example, you should always encrypt any credentials when they're being passed back and forth, even if you're right, just creating credentials, sending it to them. But I see it like often when credentials are being created and they're just temporary credentials. People are like, you have to change it anyways, right? And they're sending it unencrypted. It's like, right. It's still a security control, but because we do it so often and they're doing password resets so often, we're not following the same controls anymore, right? So it's like, it's a gradual shift and where people will get, I think the word is lackadaisical, where they get lackadaisical in protecting it. So I'd love to hear from you guys. If you guys are on, please, I'm going to throw the curious face up here. And I know you guys will get this question in a few minutes, but have you ever seen that type of situation where you enforced it at one point, but then over time the security is degraded? Please type in your comments. I'd love to read it to the group and give that example. So quick example of this is in 2011, the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense mistakenly published classified information on, guess what? On their nuclear submarines, in addition to other sensitive information in response to freedom of information request. So somebody reached out and said, hey, we'd like this information. Can it be freely available? And they did. They posted information on their classified nuclear subs program.
So they were like, yeah, sure, you can have it. Here, let me put it on Facebook.
Oh, well, yeah, it's not good. No, they had some quirks with it. Do you want to go over that with them?
Sure. The funny and sad part was that the classified data was by using image editing software to black it out. However, anyone who tried to copy the data could copy all the text, including the blackout data.
Right. So it was just like a font, right? So they just highlighted it in black, but you could still copy it and then change the font probably and read it all. Good stuff. It's rough. But once it's out there, right, it's really difficult to bring it back. So we did have a quick example from Salome. She says, I see people leaving confidential information on their desks or not locking their computers when they're away, right? And so, Brandon, we talked about this, like a physical pen test. Like you should go in, like if you're going to be on site anyways, doing a Wi-Fi pen test or something, at a minimum, do a walkthrough and see what like sticky notes with passwords on them, right? That was the notorious one for a while. Confidential information, as soon as you walk through a door, even one that's never locked, people think that nobody's going to touch that data. And that's just not the case.
Right. Yep. Right. And I mean, I think all of us had that one story where we found a password where it shouldn't have been, under the keyboard, on the monitor, you name it, right?
Well, and I'm going to be honest, like where it's notorious, like once we get access to systems, we go straight for the notes. You know that notes app on your computer?
Yeah.
That's where I'm going because I've stored passwords there before, right? So if one person does it, I'm sure a lot of people do. Now, you guys don't have to tell me if you do, but feel free to do a thumbs up if you've ever stored a password in the Notes app on your laptop. Couple more comments. Vivek said, it happens in the DoD world since people come in and out a lot, changes of workforce frequency, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're in and out, right, you're only deployed for 6-8 months. That shift happens all the time and you're passing responsibilities over to the next person. Gosh, what a headache that's got to be. I can only imagine. For sure. And then Sean's got a good one. Let me jump in real quick. He said he's had issues with recipients being unable to open encrypted emails containing PII attachments. So the recipients will often ask us for send the email unencrypted, which is a violation of policy, and customer service dictates to service the customer. Right. So that's the thing is like you have, and it's interesting because I saw this and it directly CIA. But I saw something on Twitter where they said, okay, you have your CIA triangle, right? You have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. They said, but there's one piece missing.
Okay.
Usability.
Right.
And usability has to be right there in the middle. Because as soon as that security control makes things unusable, people find a way to bypass it. So it's very interesting. Now, that's not going to be part of your exam. There is no usability in the middle of that CIA triangle. For this
But is that really under availability?
Well, look at this. So it works, just not with a certain client. It works with most people, right? So it's still available.
Not necessarily. That's where you get and this is, we'll talk about like just simple things like baby monitors, things like that, where it's accessible. You can plug it in and every PC, every Mac can use it, and you can check it off your iPhone and, your Android, and it's available.
Right.
But as soon as you can't do it you can do it on iPhone, but not an Android. Now it's unavailable. It's true. It's not available to the Android users.
That's true.
Right. So talking about data and going into this example, what Sean says, it's available to the internal environment. It's it's available to the staff, suppliers, vendors, but now it's not available to the customers. Right.
Exactly.
So, and this is where we have, all of us have had this discussion as security professionals, is that confidentiality and the data integrity is always so important to us, but the availability is important to the company and the organization. Right. They have to have it fast, easy. It has to be simple for the clients. Right.
Yeah.
This is where we're kind of juggling, right?
And it's constant ebb and flow, constantly.
Defective user.
Sean's coming.
Was it IDT10? Is that the one?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, if you type that out, it's IDT10 error. I'll find it out. It was one of the ones we used to use at the help desk.
Is there a good meme on it?
Well, it's basically calling the guy an idiot, right?
Oh, let me see. It's on Urban Dictionary. Yeah, you'll have to find it after this. Cool. We'll see if we can get a screenshot for you next time. Okay, cool. Sorry. Back to handling data, right? So occurrences of loss of control of backup tapes, right? So backup tapes should be protected with the same level of protection as the data that's being backed up. So in other words, if confidential information is on a backup tape, the backup tape should be protected as confidential information. Now, it's interesting. I got to bring in a real world experience real quick. We were talking about storing backup tapes, and this is data at rest, right? So back a section. But with a client we're working with, and we got our forensics guys, and they're talking about best practices and like how he's got a safe where he stores all his data backups, and they're all sent there in sealed bags with chain of custody. And they go, man, a safe has got to be so expensive. Like, and then I got to have a room to put it in, and and they're telling us all the reasons they couldn't. Mm-hmm. And then one of the gentlemen comes on and he goes, it's got to be cheaper than what we're doing now by storing all of this data in the cloud. Okay. Right? But it's true. Like when you're storing it in the cloud, are you labeling it appropriately? Are you marking it efficiently? What are your data retention policies on it? But if you have it if you bring it down locally, you mark it, you label it, you rotate through it so it follows your data retention policy, you stick it in a safe and you lock it. The guy goes, well, how many safes do you have? You must have 1 million safes. He goes, no, I got one safe with like 1,400 drives in it.
Oh my God.
Well, you got a little USB doohickey that can store terabytes now. Like, what are we doing?
So Sean found it was ID10T. That's it. ID10T. So anytime you were talking, I remember at the help desk, anytime you're talking to someone that was just really just not getting it. Yeah, it's an ID10T error.
Okay. So the issue is definitely related to, oh my goodness. It just spells idiot. Oh, okay. Why didn't somebody?
There you go.
That went over my head, bro. Well done.
There's the errors between the chair and the keyboard, right?
That's it. Man, so many errors are right there, aren't they? All right, cool. So we got a good example. Go ahead, jump into that for us, Brandon.
Yeah. So, however, there are many cases where they there are many cases where this just isn't followed. As an example, TD Bank lost 2 backup tapes in 2012 with more than 260,000 customer data records.
And you guys know there's a lot of data breaches. Like these details take time to come out, right? So TD Bank reported the breach to customers about 6 months after the tapes were lost, right? More than 2 years later, in October 2014, they agreed to pay $850K and reform their practices. Well, I hope the practices had been reformed already. 2.5 years later, right? Like,
well, and okay, let's talk about that as a large organization.
Yeah,
there's a lot of moving parts. Like in their defense, there's a lot of moving parts, policies that have to be implemented, things that have to be tested, proof of concepts that have to be done. So not to say that weren't in the fault, but as we know, the moving parts for larger organizations take some time to implement the new strategies, new solutions.
Yeah, you're spot on. I was trying to find the facepalm emoji because I can't scroll right now, but I still can't believe it took me that long to see the ID10T. Anyways. All right. So, right. And you're right, Brandon. Like, it comes back to change management. It comes back to updating your policies in real time when incidents happen, right? That should all be built into your incident response procedure, right? And your debrief and your hot washes at the end. What went wrong? What went well? What can we change so it goes better? But they just had to put it on paper with the lawsuit. So more recently, though, the one that we're seeing a lot more of is this improper permissions for the AWS S3 buckets. Now, I had a quick example, so I'm going to go ahead and fade over to this. So I was going through this content, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I literally just had an example of one of my connections posting a breach on LinkedIn. So I went back and I found it, and I got the screenshot up here for you guys. So he said there was a popular hotel reservation platform responsible for exposing 10 million users with a misconfigured S3 bucket. It included credit card data, reservation details, guest names, and more, right? So this is the problem. And I'm even doing this for my company. Like, we want to automate the response because right now, if a bucket is misconfigured, like an alert's created, but sometimes it's buried a little bit, right? And remediation might take a little while. Well, if you have a bucket storing that data, you need that remediation to happen like this. And there's actually what is it? It's reflex alerts. And it's called event-driven security, and it's open source, so I'll paste that in here. But if you're responsible for anybody who's worried about their publicly available S3 buckets, pass this over to them. Reflex security, it's what we're working through. So if a certain deployment is open and it has publicly available resources, it will automatically, if it's dev, change the permissions. If it's a prod, we need to make sure that it's supposed to be that way, but it'll be escalated very quickly.
That makes sense. That's actually good. And then, yeah, I mean, make sure you have kind of log bonding on those cloud instances as well, right?
Yeah.
Because if you start to see data start to go, you can actually shut it down.
Well, and you got to think, guys, like our cloud guys, they're testing accounts, they're spinning up stacks, tearing them down multiple times a day sometimes, right? So at some point, you're just, once again, getting a little lackadaisical, and there's human error, ID10T issues, right? And like you just click the wrong buttons and you're just on auto mode, right? After a bunch of meetings, it happens.
Right.
All right.
Oh, for sure.
Let me pivot back over to us real quick. Perfect. Yeah. So now we got an example from the U.S. government as well, right? And this was the one provided in the book, was that the U.S. government's Outpost program scraped social media and they put it into an S3 bucket. Right, so I'm talking Twitter, Facebook, anything publicly available, probably the LinkedIn US API for LinkedIn. But this isn't new, right? People scrape this. There's a publicly available Twitter API that I did a cool session on that you can actually use Postman to just hit and query Twitter for anything, and it's available. Well, the US government put this, they archived it named CENTCOM, and they put it in S3 bucket, and it was publicly available. They didn't lock it down. So they had all this data that was accessed by numerous people not on the project. Well, they've since changed those permissions.
You think so?
Yeah. 2.5 years later.
Once someone found out, hey, by the way, I can access this, right?
Right.
What do you mean? No, like I just went into it. I just logged right in. I had no access point, no authentication. Oh, shit. I'm sure that was what you heard by the cloud security administrator. Oh, damn it. Right. Lock that down quickly.
Oh, that's true.
So policies and procedures need to be in place to ensure that people understand how to handle sensitive data. This starts by ensuring that systems and media are labeled appropriately. Additionally, as President Reagan famously said when discussing relationships with the Soviet Union, trust but verify.
Exactly. Trust that they did it right, but be sure you do it and have checks in place. All right. Next is storing sensitive data. So this is storing sensitive data. You have to protect against losses, right? Now, we talked about data at rest. We talked about data in transit, but this is storing data on specific devices. And this comes back to encryption. So for those of you looking to take the test, and hold on real quick, my LinkedIn froze, so I'm going to reload the page. I'm not sure if we got any comments coming through. Let's see. Okay, cool. So we did have some comments come through. Let me see what I got. Vivek said he found another website have you guys heard of the very scary truepeoplesearch.com? I want to say I have. I think it's just a database full of leaked creds that it's basically have I been pawned but publicly available. What or who is behind it? It says free people. I don't know. I'll take a peek after this and reach out to you. But yeah, it looks like just a people search. I mean, you got to think it's just a database full of publicly available people records that are online, right? So maybe they scrape things. Maybe they're pulling dumps. I don't know. I'll have to take a peek. But it is interesting. Back to storing sensitive data, though. The question is, if there's a recommended encryption algorithm, what is it, Brandon?
Was it AES 256?
AES 256. So if you guys get asked, what is the recommended encryption algorithm? It's going to be AES 256. Let me type this in the chat real quick. Be the recommended encryption algorithm for CISSP. Cool. Not Blowfish, not Triple Des, not RSA, right? It's going to be AES 256.
Right. And then additionally, many operating systems include built-in capabilities to encrypt data at both the file level and disk level. Anybody know why both file and data encryption is important?
So file and disk encryption?
Yeah. Why is that important? Let's actually wait until these guys can answer this, but that's actually a good one because I'm seeing like a lot of the systems now, especially with you're looking at laptops. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's Windows and Mac. On the OS, you find that you can encrypt the file structure in the hard drive. But I wonder what people think. Why is that important? Anyone know why having both file and disk encryption is important? So I'll wait till everyone answers that because I think it's essential now when you're looking at people working remotely, right? People traveling, people kind of going out day to day. Laptops, as we know, like I've heard so many laptops being stolen from people's cars.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're in the store, they'll grab me a coffee, whatever that may be. And all of a sudden someone just breaks the window and grabs their laptop. Right.
Yeah. Well, and you got to think like I work at a company, maybe 300 people, less than that now, but we've had numerous laptops left in airports.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about 2001 to maybe 2006, 2007, you mostly had a desktop. You didn't have a laptop. Now, when you go start to work for a company, they give you a laptop.
Yeah, they do. They give you a laptop and So, but that laptop, you're carrying it with you everywhere. You're definitely pulling it out in the airport because you're waiting and bored, right? And LinkedIn has maybe failed you and not given you enough content. And if you just turn around and you hear your number and you jump out of line, boom, laptop's gone. And that's why you use full disk encryption. Right? Mm-hmm. Because if somebody steals your laptop, they cannot access that data without that password or the right credentials. Full disk encryption, Vivek got it. One in case of theft. So if somebody steals your laptop, that full disk encryption is going to protect you. The file encryption comes back to data classifications. You want to be able to password protect specific files so that even if somebody can log in, shoulder surfs your normal password, you can then further security encrypt specific files so that they would need additional credentials to access them. So that's why both are important.
And then what's that called?
File encryption? Oh, defense in depth. File encryption? Where are you going with this, Brandon?
ID10T.
That's right.
No, but it's a good point here is because it's layered security. And that's just something you guys, just remember as you guys are going through. The more layers you have in security, the better it is for your actual security posture, your program, and what you're doing. So as you have two-factor authentication, it's layered types of authentication. When you look at data protection, it's layered, right? You have the file, you have the actual hard drive encrypted, you have the files encrypted, you have authentication, two-factor authentication. So you're creating layers on top of layers to make sure everything's secure.
Yeah, now this is one that there's a note on, right? So there's a test note below this. So you may get a question on something regarding the type of media holding sensitive data. Now, here's what most people forget. The value of sensitive data is much greater than the value of the media holding the sensitive data. It's like that flash drive, that disk, that computer, the data on it is worth so much more, right? So in other words, it's cost effective to purchase high quality media, right? Nice SSDs, good hard drives with encryption on them, right? So they're worth the cost. So spend the extra money, get good media to then store your sensitive data on, because if those fail you, it just doesn't make sense to skimp out on that media.
So give me an example, Jill. So what would be one example of that where you're looking at the device, the flash drive, but the data is more important?
Yeah, I mean, take example hard drives right now, SSDs, right? So you look at Western Digital hard drives right now, and if you need a 1 terabyte, I think they're under $100 at this point, right? For an SSD, or at least an HDD, but the SSDs are coming down. So here's the question: do you get an HDD that's going to have a certain number of cycles, or do you pay the extra and get an SSD with the updated you go with the SSD. You go with the better model, because no matter what, if you're storing confidential, proprietary information on those, if they fail, if you have an incident, you don't want to have skimped on your hard drive and lost data, when if you would have spent a little extra, you would have had that extra longevity on the device. Did I answer the question?
Somewhat. And I think what we're trying to prove out here is that the hardware is not as valuable as the data. Mm-hmm. So I'll use an example here. Say the hard drive right now, you're talking about the $200, external, hard drive. Mm-hmm. But say you have your IPO on that. Say you have your legal contracts of your business, right? That's now worth X amount of dollars. So you're looking at a $200 hard drive versus, say your business is worth $10 million. Mm-hmm. And that IPO is your main focus of your business. Well, if that ever leaks out, what's the value of your company now? So that's where we're talking about data classification. Or maybe it's trade secrets. Maybe it's, a project that you're working on, releasing a new product, whatever that may be, right? Maybe it's legal documents that can't get out, right? If they get out and get released, it can really affect the company, either one, legally, right? Or two, maybe it's, it'll affect it financially. Either or, you want to make sure, like you're saying, the encryption and the security is there. So that's why I think when you look at that contrast is the hard drive, a $200, $300, $400 hard drive is not as valuable as the data that's on there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you may or may not get a question on that exam about that. So that's a good point to know. So cost benefit analysis, right? Absolutely. And you got to take the risk of what is the failure rates, and that's a risk, right?
Right.
So now we got to move on to destroying sensitive data. And we're going to talk about this. I think this is going to take us through the end of the session. So this should be good. Now, when we're destroying sensitive data, when you no longer need the sensitive data, you should destroy it. And you need to have a policy around this. Proper destruction ensures it can't fall into the wrong hands or result in unauthorized or even authorized disclosure, right? And we'll talk about what that could be here shortly.
Right. Then highly classified data requires different steps to destroy, and then in that, the data classified at a lower level. Right. So if the higher level and the lower level have different policies.
You got it, right? So for example, you may require the complete destruction of highly classified data. It's getting burned, right? Degaussed and burned, but the entire device is being destroyed for highly classified data. But if it's for personal use or unclassified use, especially we see this for device laptops. You're not going to throw your laptop away and burn it, right? At your company, you're going to wipe the disk. You're going to overwrite the data. And even if the old data might be able to be retrieved via forensic, you're still going to reissue that device to a new employee, right? For unclassified data.
Right. And then they have a NIST SP 800-88R1 guidelines for media sanitation, provides comprehensive details on different sanitization methods, such as clearing, purging, and destroying, ensuring that the data cannot be recovered by any means. Now, Joel, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
You have an old hard drive. How do you destroy it?
I overwrite it. I just rewrite it. Wait, you're serious? Like, how do I do it?
How do you, Joel, have an old hard drive with data? How do you destroy it?
Yeah. So there's like a way you can overwrite the data 7 times. And that's like I forget. Is it the NSA way of wiping it or the...
Okay.
That's how I do it. And there's a program that it'll overwrite it. And it just overwrites it enough that it's completely just gook at the end. And I've tried to forensically pull images, and it would take you forever to find anything of relevance because it's just been overwritten so many times.
So I want to ask you guys, Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn, how do you guys destroy your hard drive? You have an old hard drive, you need to get rid of it. How do you guys destroy it?
Well, I keep all my hard drives.
Yeah, there's ones that, I mean, there's ones that you have like, there's 256 gigabytes, right? And you're like, oh my God. And like, you're not going to ever store that data. It's not going to, keep it.
DoD 3 pass software. I think there's DoD 7 pass software, Sean, that does it 7 times. And then Sean says he shreds it as well. Yep, so spot on.
Drill.
Yeah, he's got a destructor machine as well. Well, even if you drill it, if there's parts left, you can still pull data off a HDD with parts left. So yeah.
So what I watched the iRobot kind of one where you hit it all 4 spots.
Mm-hmm.
So you completely wreck all the plates.
There you go.
So just right through it.
Now, you got to remember, if there's a computer, now this is kind of taking you back, you got to be sure you pull out all of the CDs, the floppy disks, any other storage to make sure you're purging those as well.
Right.
And that's talking about data remnants. So data remnants is the data that remains on the media after the data was supposedly erased. And this refers to data on hard drives as residual magnetic flux for HDDs. Now, using these tools to delete general leaves much of the data remaining on the media, right? So unless you're using a DoD 3-pass software, you just overwrite it once. A lot of that data is widely available and you can undelete it, right? So even when you're using these, traces are going to remain as less perceptible magnetic fields.
For sure. And then this is similar to a ghost image that can remain on some TV and computer monitors if the same data is displayed for longer periods of time.
Have you ever had that happen?
For TVs, yeah.
Yeah, me too. The kids left it on, what was it? The PS3 home screen for like way too long. And so it's just, that's burnt in.
Right.
Yep, good stuff. But that's similar to what happens on a hard drive, right? You'll have that ghost image on there that you can still pull. So forensics experts, right? They can retrieve this data. I've got some forensics guys who, man, they work magic.
Seagate.
Amazed.
I mean, Seagate's amazing. Western Digital, where you sit in your drive away and they can actually, find the data there on the hard drive unless you completely destroy it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then one way to remove data remnants is with a degausser. A degausser generates a heavy metal field which realigns the magnetic fields in the magnet media, such as a traditional hard drive, magnet tape, and a floppy disk drive.
Quick question, pop quiz. How much does a degausser cost?
Good question.
I've got them here between $76 and $1,700 for Alaritech HDD Drive Demolisher version 3 hard drive destroyer.
Wow.
So nothing too crazy. You could probably get a pretty basic one. You could overwrite it a couple times, then degauss it, and It's going to be toast. So good stuff. All right. Where were we? Yep. So they reliably rewrite the magnetic field to remove all data remnants. However, they're only effective on magnetic media. Now that we're in the world of SSDs or solid state drives, these are used in integrated circuitry. So I don't know if you know this about me. My dad led the SSD department at Intel for, 8 years? But he worked on the server side. So they put together the first 16 terabyte SSD for servers over at Intel, which is pretty cool. But they're not using spinning platters anymore, right? So degaussing doesn't do diddly squat on SSDs. Now, they've even done DoD 3-pass software on this stuff, and they were still able to pull stuff off of SSDs, which is really interesting. Because of the way it stores the data, you could rewrite it and certain segments won't be overwritten.
Oh, wow. And then some SSDs include built-in erase commands to sanitize the entire disk. But unfortunately, these weren't affected on some SSDs from a different manufacturer. Due to these risks, the best method of sanitizing SSD is destruction.
Right. So exactly. So, and it's interesting the way the block storage works on these SSDs, and we'll have to go into it at another day, but it just doesn't overwrite it, right? It's not overwriting the security. So NSA requires complete destruction of SSDs using a disintegrator. So they've taken it one pass shredding, right? They are lighting those puppies up until they're dust.
Right.
Now, there are organizations that sell info destruction and sanitization solutions, right? Think, what's the paper shredder place? Anyways, similar, but for physical media.
Mountain, what is it?
Iron Mountain. You're right. Spot on.
Great minds think alike.
Yep. Now, another method of protecting SSDs is to ensure that all the data is encrypted, right? If the sanitization method fails, the data is going to be unreadable, right? Because it's encrypted. So they would have to have credentials to decrypt it and then read the data, and then hopefully it's been wiped, right? So they'd have to take multiple steps.
For sure. And then be careful when performing any type of clearing, purging, or sanitization process. The human operator or the tool involved in the activities may not properly perform the task of completely removing the data from the media. Software can be flawed, magnets can be faulty, and either can be used improperly. Always verify that the desired result is achieved after performing any sanitized process.
Same with backups, right? I have a feeling you guys will see something on the CISSP like, what should you do after a backup has been taken? What should you do after a hard drive has been sanitized? Verify, double check.
Verify.
Sure that's it. Now, we got to talk about the list because I told you guys we'd make it. We got 4 minutes left, so we got to talk through a few of these methods. Erasing media, I'm going to toss that to you, Brandon.
So erasing media is simplified performing a delete operation against a file, a selection of files, or the entire media. In most cases, the deletion or removal process removes only the directory or catalog link to the data. The actual data remains on the drive.
Yeah, so when you delete something on your desktop, data's still there. It wasn't erased, right? So as new files are written, eventually it will then overwrite the data, similar to that hard drive, right? But if it's a new computer and you delete a file on these first few blocks, your computer is going to rewrite all those other blocks until it comes back to that one and writes over it. So data could be there for a long, long time. Now, clearing data, this is one of the questions. So clearing or overwriting data is the process of preparing media for reuse to ensure the data has been cleared, similar to DoD 3-pass software, right? So it's going to be cleared. Unclassified data or zeros and ones are going to be written over all the addressable locations on the media device. And one method writes a single character or specific bit pattern over the whole media device. So this is, so we talked about that, DoD 3. It's going to repeat it in 3 separate passes. They have 7 separate passes to really make sure. And for example, spare sectors on hard drives, sectors labeled as bad areas on modern SSDs, are not necessarily cleared, right? So if there's a bad sector, it may not be cleared.
Right.
Oh, I had a quick picture of this, of the 3-pass. Let me get this data class. Nope, this is going to be clearing hard drive. Let me kick that up. So you'll have your first character, your complement character, and then random bits written on top of that. So either way, you're going to be getting that. So absolutely use the DoD 3 clearing process. All right, and we're back. You want to take purging, or you want me to jump into it?
Where are we here? Just kind of going through here.
Right below the image. And Vivek said, great video, guys. Thank you. Literally stumbled into your video. Hey, man, thank you for joining us. Tuesdays at 7. He says, do all degaussers pop with a sound as loud as ours does? I don't know. I've only used one once, and I think mine made a noise too. I'll have to watch some videos on it and see if they all do. Sean might have some insight for us. All right, but let's jump into purging, because the difference between clearing. So clearing is overriding. Purging is more intense form of clearing that prepares media for reuse in less secure environments. So this is more your DoD 7, right, is what I'm seeing here. Oh, no, right. It would include degaussing as well. So degaussing is going to be your purge. DoD 3 or just overriding is going to be your clearing.
Right. Well, like you said, a purging process will repeat the clearing process multiple times and may combine it with another method such as degaussing to remove the data. Even though purging is intended to remove all data remnants, it isn't always trusted. So
more than one method, right, could be the purging side of things. So the government doesn't consider any purging method acceptable to purge top secret data, right? Top secret, it will remain top secret until completely destroyed.
Right.
All right.
That's where you got your degaussing, right?
That's it. Yep. We've already hit on all that. So when organizations donate or sell their used equipment, oh man, I got a good one. Voting devices. So after the 2016 election, there was a buddy of mine and he bought a voting machine for $100. And then one of his friends did it as well, who worked for a company, and he wrote an article on it. But all of the data was still on there. All of it.
What?
It was an old voting machine. They just got put in storage and then they clearanced it out and somebody bought it and all that data is still there, right? So the only way, even if, talk about a terrible data retention policy. That's all I'm saying. you got to be careful, and you have to be able to you got to be able to purge or destroy the storage device and sell it without a storage device if necessary.
Right. That totally makes sense. And that's why, we said before, remove your hard drives, right? Remove the flash, remove the, even just RAM, all this areas that could be storage. Floppy disk, they said, CD-ROM.
I know some of this CISSP stuff is a little outdated. So Vivek also said when they have incidents with classified systems, they reimage the entire laptop. And we see that too, right? Now, be careful because that is a new laptop image, but I think data will still be on your hard drive, even if you reimage that. And then it comes to declassification, right?
Right. So declassification involves any process that purges media or a system in preparation for reuse in an unclassified environment. Sanitation methods can be used to prepare media for declassification, but often the efforts required to securely declassify media are significantly greater than the cost of new media for a less secure environment.
Yeah, the cost benefit just doesn't make sense. Most people will just destroy it with the cost of storage just dropping so quickly. It just makes sense to purchase new stuff. And then appropriate asset retention is kind of the next section, right? So I'm going to jump into record retention. That's cool, Brandon. But it involves retaining or maintaining important information as long as it's needing and then destroying it when it's not. I really wanted to get to that definition below. So go ahead and jump through this, and let's we might have to skip a little, but let's get to that example we had below.
Yeah, so some laws, regulations dictate the length of time that the organization should retain data, such as 3 years, 7 years, or eventually, or even indefinitely. Organizations have the responsibility of identifying laws and regulations that apply and comply with them. However, even in the absence of external requirements, an organization should still identify how long to retain data.
Okay, and we're going to skip down to kind of right after that, what fits in perfect. Guys, we have one last example, and we'll wrap up for the day. Saving data longer than necessary presents unnecessary legal issues. So when it comes to retention policies, have a point at which you destroy that data. There was an example where Boeing was once the target of a class action lawsuit, and they learned that they had a warehouse filled with email backup tapes that they never destroyed. Not all the tapes were relevant, but what they had to do was they had to collect them all, go through all of them to find the relevant ones, and they had to restore 14,000 tapes to examine them. They ended up settling the lawsuit for like almost $100 million, but they speculated it would have been a very different outcome if those tapes had never existed at all. Interesting stuff.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So once again, people get aggressive with it. Guys, get aggressive with your data retention policy. Have one in place. Make sure emails get deleted after a certain amount of time. It can reduce liabilities. So
hold on. Let's kind of walk through that. So first, understand your governance, your compliance, your regulations, and then make sure that your data policy really is actual in line with that and in line with your corporation. And right? Because you don't. Go ahead.
I was going to say right below that, you got to document your processes and procedures so that people can duplicate that when they come across the need.
Right, for sure.
Cool. Awesome, Brandon. That was session 13, domain 2.1. You rock, man. Thanks for once again organizing this, putting it together. I can't thank you enough, Brandon.
You're awesome, Joel.
That's what I was waiting for. And everybody who
joined
us.
Hold on. Let's kind of talk this. Joel.
Yeah.
All the information that we've been giving you guys and all that, it's a collaborative effort for Joel and myself. And if you guys don't really realize this or know this, that we sat here for an hour and a half before the session, organizing everything, and Joel's getting everything ready, preparing. So Joel, you do a lot of hard work to make this happen. So, my hat's off to you.
Thank you, sir. My hair is off to you. Thank you guys for joining us. We would not be here without you. So thank you guys for joining us, participating. Vivek, guys, Jessica, Sean, Salome, thank you guys, everybody, so much. Who else joined us? Corey, we love you guys. Thank you. We will see you guys next week. Have a great week, everyone. See you, Brandon.
Have a good night.